The California sunshine may still glow over Montecito, but behind those carefully guarded gates, reports suggest one of the most explosive chapters in modern British royal family history may already be unfolding. And this time the story is no longer about media interviews, documentary deals, or carefully scripted public appearances, because according to palace watchers, the real battle now centers on identity, legacy, and the future of two children caught between two completely different worlds. And if those reports are even partially true, what happens next could permanently redefine the public story of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. For years, millions of viewers believed the Sussex story was simple: a prince who walked away from duty, and a Hollywood outsider who helped him build a new life. But in 2026, insiders claim that narrative may be collapsing faster than anyone expected, because behind the cameras, behind the podcasts, behind the streaming contracts, a much deeper conflict may have been quietly growing between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And at the center of that conflict is something far more powerful than money, fame, or even royal titles. It is the battle over childhood, privacy, and the legacy of a prince who never forgot what happened to his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. Reports suggest that for Prince Harry, the memory of 1997 never became history. It became a permanent warning, a deeply personal reminder of what happens when cameras become more important than protection, when headlines become more valuable than peace, and when public fascination begins to consume private lives. That trauma, according to royal commentators, may now be shaping every major decision Prince Harry is making behind closed doors, especially when it comes to Archie and Lilibet. But here is where everything becomes far more complicated. Sources close to California media circles claim that Meghan Markle continues to see visibility as power, relevance as currency, and public storytelling as the foundation of modern influence. And in many ways that approach helped transform Meghan Markle from a television actress into one of the most discussed women in the world. But what happens when that same philosophy collides with the deeply guarded instincts of a prince raised inside the walls of Buckingham Palace? What would you do if protecting your children meant challenging the very person you once believed understood your pain? That question, according to palace insiders, may now define every conversation happening inside the Montecito estate, because while public appearances continue to project stability, private decisions reportedly tell a very different story. Analysts tracking the Sussex brand claim that recent lifestyle branding moves, children-related image strategy, and carefully timed media positioning may have triggered a serious emotional fracture between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Because while much of the world remained focused on celebrity headlines, sources suggest Prince Harry may have been quietly building something far more strategic, something far more permanent, and something that points toward independence rather than reconciliation. Real estate observers in Montecito reportedly noticed unusual activity connected to legal representatives associated with Prince Harry, and while no official confirmation exists, speculation continues to grow that the Duke of Sussex may have been exploring properties that look nothing like the luxury image attached to the Sussex brand. Not sprawling celebrity compounds. Not ocean view mansions. Not multimillion-dollar status symbols. Instead, reports suggest a far quieter possibility: a modest American cottage. And if those reports prove true, the symbolism could be impossible to ignore. Because a cottage is not just a home. A cottage is a statement. A cottage is distance from excess. A cottage is separation from performance. A cottage is the kind of place a man chooses when image no longer matters, but peace does. So the question now is no longer whether Prince Harry is unhappy. The real question is whether Prince Harry, the son of King Charles III, the brother of Prince William, and the man who once walked away from the monarchy, may now be quietly preparing the most unexpected return of all. And what happened next, according to multiple royal observers, raised even bigger questions about palace involvement, financial protection, and a move that may already be changing the balance of power inside the House of Windsor. So if you want to uncover what Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and even King Charles III may know about this rapidly evolving royal drama, make sure you subscribe, stay with us until the end, and tell us in the comments. If you were in Prince Harry's position, would you choose fame or family? If the possibility of a quiet separation already seemed dramatic, what emerged next has pushed palace observers, legal analysts, and even longtime followers of the British royal family into completely new territory. Because according to reports circulating through both California legal circles and London royal commentary, the real strategy may never have started with homes, headlines, or emotional distance, but with something far colder, far more disciplined, and far more difficult for the public to notice: money, documentation, and the silent architecture of protection. And once royal insiders began connecting those pieces, many started asking whether Prince Harry had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone realized. Source: transcript context. For years, public commentary often painted Prince Harry as the emotional prince, the man driven by instinct, memory, loyalty, and at times frustration, while Meghan Markle was often framed as the strategist, the media operator, the public architect of the Sussex reinvention. But recent reporting suggests that image may have been dangerously incomplete. Because according to legal observers familiar with high-net-worth family disputes in California, the financial footprint connected to Prince Harry appears unusually disciplined, unusually compartmentalized, and unusually resistant to the kinds of financial entanglements that often define celebrity marriages. And this is where everything becomes even more interesting. Because when analysts began looking beyond public contracts, beyond streaming headlines, and beyond the Montecito image machine, one number continued appearing again and again in discussions surrounding Prince Harry: $60 million. A fortune widely linked to the legacy of Diana, Princess of Wales, family inheritances, and long-standing royal financial structures. But according to multiple reports, that wealth may never have entered the shared financial ecosystem many assumed existed between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. If those reports are accurate, then what the world thought was a joint empire may actually have been two completely different financial universes operating under one roof. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Did Prince Harry quietly trust love, but never fully surrender control? Financial commentators reviewing public reporting suggest that California family law often protects inheritances when those assets remain isolated, documented, and untouched by marital commingling. And while no court filings have confirmed any divorce scenario, reports suggest advisors close to Prince Harry may have spent years ensuring exactly that. Separate accounts, separate documentation, separate structures, separate legal guidance. Not the behavior of a man drifting through Hollywood, but potentially the behavior of a man who understands that legacy, once diluted, may never fully return. And if that sounds like speculation, the next layer becomes even harder to ignore. Because sources close to royal finance circles claim portions of wealth associated with Prince Harry may be linked to protected trust structures connected to the United Kingdom, legacy estate planning, and jurisdictional arrangements designed specifically to preserve generational assets. None of this has been publicly confirmed by palace officials, but the consistency of those reports has triggered intense discussion among royal commentators. Now ask yourself this. If Prince Harry truly had no long-term concerns, why would such elaborate financial boundaries allegedly remain in place years after leaving royal life? And this is exactly where palace watchers believe the emotional story begins transforming into a strategic one. Because while streaming headlines focused on documentaries, interviews, and public grievances, another story may have been unfolding quietly behind accountants, advisors, and confidential meetings. And according to people watching Montecito very closely, those meetings may not have been random. Boutique legal consultants, private scheduling, unannounced consultations, property evaluations, financial restructuring, estate review. Not the visible movements of a celebrity couple building together, but potentially the invisible movements of a man preparing options. And as those reports intensified, one name began resurfacing again and again inside royal conversations: King Charles III. Because while much of the public assumed the relationship between Prince Harry and King Charles III remained emotionally distant, insiders now suggest communication may never have completely disappeared. And in recent months, reports claim the lines between California and palace advisors may have become significantly more active. But what would that mean? Could King Charles III, a monarch deeply invested in legacy, quietly be creating a pathway home for the son who once walked away? And if that possibility exists, then another question becomes impossible to avoid. Where does that leave Meghan Markle? Because according to brand analysts following the Sussex commercial ecosystem, the financial momentum surrounding joint projects appears far less certain than it once did. Streaming pressure, audience fatigue, brand fragmentation, market skepticism, public polarization. None of those challenges automatically signal personal collapse, but together, those patterns create something far more dangerous: vulnerability. And insiders suggest Prince Harry may understand that better than anyone. Which brings us to the most fascinating part of this story. Because while California may represent celebrity influence, another center of gravity appears to be pulling harder with every passing month. Buckingham Palace, the institution where Prince William, the future king, continues shaping the next chapter of the monarchy alongside Catherine, Princess of Wales. And according to palace commentators, no one understands institutional timing better than Prince William. Some observers even believe the future king has remained remarkably patient, avoiding public escalation, avoiding emotional retaliation, and allowing time, circumstance, and public reality to reshape the Sussex narrative naturally. Whether those claims are accurate remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. The public image surrounding Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, continues projecting stability, continuity, and institutional confidence. So here is the question for you. If you were Prince Harry, watching one brother move steadily toward the throne, watching King Charles III protect a centuries-old institution, and watching your own personal brand face increasing scrutiny, would you double down on celebrity, or would you quietly reconnect with legacy? Because what happened next, according to several royal observers, may have changed everything. Reports began surfacing about international scheduling connected to Prince Harry, appearances that looked less like entertainment branding and more like diplomatic positioning, less like Hollywood and more like service, less like commercial storytelling and more like institutional rehabilitation. And if those appearances were truly coordinated with palace awareness, then the financial protections, the cottage rumors, the private consultations, and the emotional distance may all point toward one chilling possibility. This was never an impulsive reaction. This may have been a long, disciplined exit strategy. But if Prince Harry is rebuilding his future one move at a time, then the next chapter becomes even more explosive, because the conversation is no longer about money, homes, or headlines. The next chapter may involve public duty, global diplomacy, and a royal operation that some insiders are already calling the most unexpected rehabilitation in modern monarchy history. And trust me, what reportedly happened next between Prince Harry, King Charles III, and the inner circles of Buckingham Palace may completely change the way you see this entire royal drama. So before we move into the next chapter, where diplomatic missions, palace strategy, and the future of the Sussex name take center stage, subscribe to the channel, join this growing community of royal watchers, and tell us in the comments. Do you believe Prince Harry has been quietly planning a return all along? Or is something even bigger happening behind palace walls? If the financial walls surrounding Prince Harry already suggested a carefully engineered exit strategy, what happened next pushed this story beyond family tension, beyond celebrity headlines, and into something that longtime royal observers describe as far more significant, because according to reports emerging from diplomatic circles, security analysts, and palace correspondents, Prince Harry may no longer be positioning himself as a celebrity exile in California, but as something entirely different, a prince quietly moving back towards service, duty, and institutional relevance. And if those reports are accurate, then what looked like a marriage story may actually be the opening chapter of one of the most unexpected image rehabilitations in modern British royal family history. Source: transcript context. Because in recent weeks, royal commentators began focusing on one event that, at first glance, looked like a humanitarian visit, a diplomatic appearance, or perhaps a routine extension of the Invictus mission, but the deeper analysts looked, the more unusual the details became. Reports suggest that when Prince Harry traveled internationally for veteran-focused engagements connected to Eastern Europe, the logistics behind that trip appeared unusually polished, unusually coordinated, and unusually aligned with the operational standards historically associated with palace-level planning rather than celebrity public relations. And this is where the story begins changing faster than most people realize. Because in royal communications, nothing high-profile happens by accident. Security movements are noticed. Media accreditation is noticed. Press placement is noticed. Diplomatic access is noticed. And when veteran royal correspondents reportedly appeared near events associated with Prince Harry, palace watchers immediately began asking a question that nobody inside Montecito may have wanted the public to ask. Was King Charles III quietly opening a door? And if that question sounds dramatic, what happened next made the speculation even stronger. Because according to several royal commentators, the structure of those appearances looked less like independent brand management and more like what some insiders privately describe as controlled reintegration, a slow, deliberate process where damaged public relationships are rebuilt through service, international credibility, humanitarian visibility, and institutional alignment. In other words, not Hollywood, not streaming, not podcasts, not controversy, service, duty, discipline. And that shift may explain why the name of Prince William, the future king, has suddenly become impossible to ignore in this conversation. Because anyone who understands the internal dynamics of the monarchy understands one reality above all others. No long-term reintegration of Prince Harry becomes meaningful without awareness inside the orbit of Prince William. And no major image rehabilitation reaches institutional credibility without alignment from the people protecting the future of the crown. And that includes Catherine, Princess of Wales. Now think about that for a moment. If Prince William, the future king, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, the Princess of Wales, continue projecting stability, family trust, public duty, and institutional confidence, what happens if Prince Harry suddenly begins appearing in a narrative built around those same values? Could the monarchy be preparing not for reconciliation, but for repositioning? And if so, what happens to Meghan Markle? That question has become increasingly difficult for analysts to ignore, because while Prince Harry appears, at least according to reports, to be moving closer to institutional legitimacy, Meghan Markle appears to be facing a very different reality, one shaped by brand pressure, commercial uncertainty, audience fatigue, and a public image that remains deeply polarizing across both the United States and the United Kingdom. And this is where things become even more uncomfortable. Because multiple media analysts now suggest that the Sussex brand may have reached a critical crossroads, where the value of the partnership depends entirely on whether both public identities continue moving in the same direction. But what happens when one public figure moves toward Hollywood, while the other appears to move toward heritage? What happens when one story depends on visibility, while the other increasingly depends on privacy? What happens when one future depends on reinvention, while the other depends on restoration? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, can both futures survive inside the same marriage? That question, according to several palace commentators, may now be shaping decisions happening far beyond public view. Because while California cameras continue focusing on branding, scheduling, and public image, reports suggest private conversations connected to Buckingham Palace may be focused on something far more strategic: credibility, continuity, and the long-term protection of the crown. And inside that equation, one name carries enormous weight: Prince William. For years, commentators have described Prince William as patient, disciplined, emotionally controlled, and deeply aware of institutional timing. And whether those observations are fully accurate or not, one reality remains impossible to ignore. The public image surrounding Prince William continues strengthening, especially alongside Catherine, Princess of Wales, whose return to public life has been closely followed by millions. And now some royal observers believe that timing may not be accidental. Because if the monarchy is entering a new era under King Charles III while simultaneously preparing for the eventual reign of Prince William, then every relationship, every alliance, and every family fracture suddenly becomes strategically important. Which brings us back to Prince Harry. Because according to several reports, Prince Harry may now represent something far more valuable than a former royal rebel. Prince Harry may represent redemption. A brother who left. A son who rebelled. A prince who criticized the institution. And now, perhaps a royal figure quietly discovering that identity built on service may outlast identity built on headlines. So here is the question for you. If you were Prince William, the future king, would you welcome back a brother who once challenged the institution? If that brother returned stronger, wiser, and ready to serve? Or would some wounds remain too deep? Because what reportedly happened after those international appearances may answer exactly that. Sources close to royal media circles claim communication between advisors linked to Prince Harry and figures connected to London became noticeably more active. And while no official palace statement has confirmed any formal reconciliation, the pattern of appearances, messaging, and timing has fueled intense speculation that something carefully managed may already be underway. And if those patterns continue, then the next phase of this story becomes even more explosive, because the conversation is no longer about emotional separation, financial protection, or private property. The next phase may involve titles, legacy, custody, public standing, and the very survival of the Sussex identity. So before we move into the chapter where Meghan Markle may face the most difficult public battle of this entire saga, subscribe to the channel, join our growing community of royal watchers, and tell us in the comments. Do you believe Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, would ever support a full return for Prince Harry? Or has this royal drama already gone too far? If the quiet property searches in Montecito hinted that Prince Harry might be emotionally preparing for a different future, what emerged next suggested something far more strategic, far more calculated, and according to royal commentators, far more difficult for the public to detect, because behind the headlines, behind the lifestyle branding, and behind every carefully managed public appearance. Reports suggest Prince Harry may have been building not simply physical distance from Meghan Markle, but financial distance as well. Source: transcript context. For years, the world watched Prince Harry and Meghan Markle as if the Sussex brand was one unified empire, one shared mission, one financial machine moving toward the same destination. But insiders now suggest the reality may have been far more complex, because while public contracts, streaming deals, interviews, and commercial partnerships created the image of total unity, legal analysts following the story claim that some of the most important assets connected to Prince Harry may have remained carefully protected, carefully documented, and carefully separated from the Hollywood engine surrounding the Sussex name. And this is where everything becomes even more fascinating. Because according to financial observers familiar with high-net-worth family structures, a significant portion of wealth associated with Prince Harry has long been linked to inheritance, legacy funds, and family assets connected to Diana, Princess of Wales, and while no official documents connected to any divorce scenario have been made public, reports suggest advisors close to Prince Harry may have spent years ensuring those funds remain protected under separate financial structures. Now ask yourself this. Would a man driven purely by emotion spend years quietly building legal walls around his inheritance? Or would that suggest something far more deliberate? That question has become impossible for royal watchers to ignore, because according to people tracking financial activity connected to Montecito, private consultations involving estate advisors, trust specialists, and confidential legal experts reportedly became more frequent over the past year, and while none of those meetings confirm a separation, the timing has fueled intense speculation across both London and California. And if that speculation proves accurate, then what the public thought was emotional distance may actually have been strategic preparation. Because according to several analysts, the most powerful move in any high-profile separation is never the public statement. It is the paperwork that comes years before the statement. And that may explain why the name of King Charles III has suddenly become central to this conversation, because insiders claim communication between advisors connected to Prince Harry and figures associated with Buckingham Palace may never have completely disappeared, even during the most publicly difficult chapters of the Sussex story. So here is the real question. Could King Charles III have quietly remained the safety net while the world believed the family divide was permanent? And if that possibility exists, then another name becomes impossible to ignore. Prince William, the future king, whose public image alongside Catherine, Princess of Wales, continues projecting stability, continuity, and quiet institutional authority. Some royal commentators now believe Prince Harry may be looking at that image very differently in 2026, not with resentment, not with rebellion, but with something far more powerful: perspective. Because when Hollywood headlines begin fading, when commercial pressure begins rising, and when family legacy begins calling louder than celebrity relevance, even the most dramatic departures can begin to look temporary. So what would you do if you were Prince Harry? Would you continue chasing a brand, or quietly rebuild a legacy? Because what reportedly happened after those financial protections were put in place may have changed everything. And in the next chapter, royal insiders claim international appearances, palace coordination, and a possible diplomatic return may reveal that Prince Harry is no longer simply protecting wealth. Prince Harry may be reclaiming identity. So before we move into that explosive next chapter, where Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and even King Charles III may play a bigger role than anyone expected, subscribe to the channel, join our growing community of royal watchers, and tell us in the comments. Do you believe Prince Harry has been planning this quietly for years? Or is the real royal strategy only just beginning? If the financial safeguards, the quiet property searches, and the growing whispers of palace coordination seem dramatic, what emerged in the final phase of this royal saga may be the most revealing development of all, because according to royal commentators, former palace staff, and analysts who have spent decades studying the survival instincts of the British royal family, the real story may never have been about who won the headlines, who controlled the interviews, or who dominated social media, but about who understood that in the world of monarchy, image may create attention, but legacy creates survival. Source: transcript context. And that is exactly why so many eyes are now fixed on Prince Harry. Because after years of documentaries, memoirs, public criticism, and one of the most controversial departures in modern royal history, reports now suggest that Prince Harry may finally be facing the most important question of his entire adult life, a question that no publicist, no streaming platform, and no California brand strategist can answer for him. What matters more, relevance or legacy? And if that question sounds simple, what comes next makes it far more complicated. Because insiders claim that the recent movements connected to Prince Harry, from private legal consultations to carefully structured public appearances, from financial protection strategies to increasingly service-focused positioning, may not represent panic, may not represent emotional reaction, and may not even represent marital conflict alone. Some believe those moves represent something much bigger. A prince slowly rediscovering the institutional identity that once shaped every part of his life. But if that is true, where does that leave Meghan Markle? That question has become increasingly difficult for media analysts to ignore, because according to branding experts, the commercial future of Meghan Markle has always been deeply connected to the mystique of royalty, the global fascination surrounding the Sussex name, and the emotional narrative of a couple who promised to rewrite the rules of the monarchy. But what happens when one half of that narrative begins moving toward privacy, heritage, and institutional service, while the other remains deeply connected to visibility, reinvention, and public positioning? Can one brand survive when two identities begin moving in opposite directions? And that may be the most important question of all. Because inside Buckingham Palace, timing has always mattered more than emotion, strategy has always mattered more than headlines, and according to longtime royal observers, King Charles III understands that perhaps better than anyone. Some reports suggest that the king may be quietly keeping communication channels open, not because the past has been forgotten, but because institutions built over centuries do not think in months. Institutions think in generations. And if that is true, then another name becomes impossible to ignore. Prince William, the future king. Because while the Sussex story captured headlines across the world, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, continued building something far quieter, far steadier, and far harder to manufacture: public trust. Whether through service, family appearances, or long-term institutional stability, the image surrounding the Prince and Princess of Wales has remained central to the future of the crown. So imagine this for a moment. If Prince Harry truly decides to move closer to duty, closer to heritage, and closer to the institution once left behind, would Prince William, the future king, eventually open that door? Or have some fractures become too historic to fully repair? That question may define the next decade of royal history. Because according to commentators, following every move, every silence, and every carefully timed appearance, the Sussex story may no longer be about a marriage, a media contract, or a California lifestyle. The Sussex story may now be transforming into something much deeper. A battle between modern fame and inherited responsibility, between curated visibility and quiet service, between reinvention and return. And in that battle, one truth continues becoming clearer. Titles can create influence. Money can create opportunity. Media can create attention. But only legacy creates permanence. So as this extraordinary royal drama continues unfolding, we want to hear from you. If you were Prince Harry, would you choose the unpredictability of celebrity or the enduring weight of family legacy? If you were Meghan Markle, would you fight to preserve the Sussex brand or build something entirely new? And if you were Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, would you welcome reconciliation or protect the future of the monarchy at all costs? Tell us what you think in the comments below, because your perspective is part of this conversation. And if you enjoy deep royal analysis, high-retention storytelling, and the hidden dynamics behind the world's most powerful families, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and join our growing community of royal watchers, because the next chapter involving Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and King Charles III may be even more surprising than anything we have seen so far. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep watching the story behind the crown.